This is the first day of the May 88 7-day retreat. For people who have not been to a retreat here before, and for all of us who have been to some or many retreats before, can we say something about listening to a talk such as this? One may have heard these words before, maybe on tape, but in listening now, with an openness, can one hear what is being said freshly? For the first time? Meaning the mind is not locked in memory, but open to listen. And look. First of all, it was said last night, and let me repeat it, be comfortable for a talk, as comfortable as possible in the posture, the cushions you use, or the bench or the chair, so that the listening doesn't need to be disturbed by having to deal with pain, discomfort in the sitting posture. And there's a lot of pain in the leg or back in sitting, then that takes a lot of energy. And that energy is not there for the open listening out of a relaxed physical state. There are all kinds of chairs, benches, cushions, and one will find out in the course of the week that maybe what seems comfortable at the beginning isn't so later. If one is sitting on the floor, feel free to change your posture, the way you keep your legs. And in changing the way one is sitting, can one do it very quietly, carefully? So the motion does not impact the listening, the general listening. If, as we said last night, if there is listening to the sounds of changing one's legs around, if that listening is there, it is part of the total listening. Part of the wholeness of attention. Let me also say what is being said in a talk or in meetings is unconditionally open to questioning by anybody and everybody. Nothing that is said here is said to be accepted as being true or believed in or repeated on faith that she knows what she's talking about. Can one be very careful with that? Because what is being said is said so that each one of us looks for ourselves, for oneself, whether this is so, to see it. To understand the words is one thing. And even to understand on a verbal level and an intellectual level what is being said may have some helpful effect in seeing it directly. Maybe later, when one is not even thinking about it. Yeah, this is so. This is what was being talked about. But we're not just talking on a verbal level. We're looking, questioning, verifying that what is said is actually so. Or maybe it isn't so. Then if this is how you see it, please bring it to a meeting so we can look together afresh. The precise words that were said will not be remembered, very likely not to be remembered by either you or me. But that doesn't matter, because we can look at what is being talked about, what is questioned, right then and there, in a new way. So please do not hesitate at any time to bring up what doesn't seem to make sense, what causes further questions or confusion, or what one wants to take further, clarify. That's what all flows back into the retreat, such discussions in meetings. Because any question that is brought up in a meeting which lends itself to a general investigation and looking will be brought up in the next talk or in one of the next talks. So if one feels shy or hesitant or afraid of saying something, let's look at that too. Bring it. Open it up. This is not a relationship here of an authority with students, disciples, or whatever these relationships may be elsewhere. Here in looking, in talking, we're examining things together on the same level. Are we on the same level? Or do we have the idea of, I'm this, I'm not experienced in this, I've just started. Other people may know so much more about it. The person who is speaking has done this for a number of years, so she must have more of this or more experience, more authority, expertise. Can one see such assumptions and dissipate them, let them go, so that we can meet directly as two inquirers on a friendly basis? Which needs seeing the images that one has of oneself and the person who's talking. And can one see that these are images? And the power of these images to distort or filter or put special value on what is being heard, rather than just opening and looking, is this so? Is she saying the right thing? Can I tell? Or do I have to take it on faith? If one has to take it on faith, one creates problems for oneself, because what is said may not be true. One has to see for oneself what is true this moment. Can I take anybody's word for it? One can, but with that, the barriers that exist between human beings continue. So I hope nobody minds if what is brought up in a meeting is used in a talk. It is never quite in the same form. As I said, I don't remember the exact words. Also, it may become a combined question of many similar questions. It's never revealed who's the one who said this. If it is too revealing, we won't use it. It reminds me of a time back when somebody, it was still when we were at the camp on the lake, somebody came to a meeting and said, you know, when you started talking about what I had mentioned to you in a meeting, I became very angry. Not just angry, it was a feeling of betrayal. Betrayal of confidence that what had been mentioned to you was brought up in a talk. And I had a sinking feeling. And then the person just burst out laughing and said, you know, I saw that this was just an image that got hurt and felt betrayed. And the whole thing was finished with that. The anger was finished. I still said something like, I'm sorry that this happened. And he said, what are you talking about? It's just an image. In that case, something was seen, really seen, not just understood rationally or intellectually. And yet, the brain doesn't end making images at that moment. Or does it? If there's a moment of inattention, it will begin weaving images again. Now I'm somebody who has understood, and how marvelous. Maybe I'm enlightened or something. Because this brain, or the habitual processes of thinking about oneself, want to grab onto anything, being somebody, becoming something. That's what happens in that enclosed space of inattention, being in an enclosed room where one reviews all the videos about oneself or creates new ones, to give oneself some feelings of solace or grandeur or being good, and living on the energies that such images create throughout the body, temporarily. They fizzle, so we have to keep going with it. It's like an addiction. Addicted to image making and its effects. Not just image making about oneself, but about what one calls the others. We're not saying it's bad or right or wrong, but can it be seen as it happens and see what its effects are on the body, on the mind, and on our relationship with each other, which is marred, it is distorted, filtered, not free-flowing when they're images of each other. Images fed by the past, what we remember somebody did, or we did, or what we are, or this person is. Awe-inspiring images or hatred-inspiring images. Yes. As long as that operates, this process operates in human beings, which it does, there cannot be peace on earth. And goodwill. It's impossible. So can one, in a retreat such as this, one may just be here for a few hours, or for a day, a weekend, or a whole 7 days? Can one come in immediate touch with this image-making process? The enclosure of it, the isolation of it, the separation from what goes on around one as one is captivated by creating images about what was, headlines about one's last moment's experience, formulating it to oneself, talking to oneself about it, and then reacting to the story one is creating with pride or with depression, frustration or anger. This is how we react to the stories we create and abstract from what happens to us. Alone and in our relationship with each other and with things. Can that room open up, the dark room, open up and a shaft of light illumine what's going on in the dark room? Without any idea or agenda what to do about it. That's part of the dark room. Creating plans of how to deal with the problems in the future. Whereas what really helps and changes is this insight into what happens. The dissipation of the reaction that our ideas about ourselves and others cause in us. Insight into reaction. One person said this morning, I realize everything I do is a reaction. There's nothing that I do, say, feel, which is not a reaction. Person said, I've heard it before and said it before, but it's clear. I've seen it. It is so. What happens when this is seen at the moment one reacts with anger or feelings of violence toward someone who has said something or done something? Or with fear, or guilt, or a conditioned niceness or politeness. What happens when there is insight that this is reaction from the past? Conditioned, programmed reaction. It's interrupted at that moment, isn't it? it is interrupted, or else there wouldn't have been an insight into it. As long as it rolls on, there's no insight. An insight, and the thing is disrupted. What happens at that moment, at this crucial moment of awareness or attention or insight? So many times one feels one wants to just go on with this. Something has been set in motion physically too. A glandular, muscular, organismic response is set in motion through the fear or anger. And it seems to have a driving force. It wants release or expression. One craves the satisfaction of that, anticipated again through memory. But if there is a moment of insight, one does not have to go on with any momentum. No matter how strong it seems to feel physically, organismically, or mentally. That is to be felt by oneself. One does not have to continue with it, which does not mean I have to repress it, I have to control it. That's program, that's conditioning. It's not insight. Insight is intelligent, it's free, open. Intelligence meaning seeing this leads to that. An angry outburst or a going with a momentum of desire can be seen to create more complications. Any immediate release is not resolution. Already has the seeds of the further build-up. It can be seen when there's insight. The freedom from reaction, even though physically it's all triggered, it's all already maybe been running. One has to observe this for oneself in one's moment-to-moment living, which is so inattentive most of the time, but doesn't have to be that way, just because it's always been that way. At a moment of attention, there is not just the disrupted momentum of anger or fear or desire, there's also the freshness of air coming through the door or window. All the sounds of traffic maybe, or refrigerator, or if one is lucky, of birds and peepers. The feeling, the sensations of the body may be in tension, the muscles may be flexed, the fists clenched. Maybe the teeth gnashing. One person told me that I noticed while I was sitting how I was gnashing my teeth a good part of the time. There's so much in this moment of life to be in touch with, beside the momentum of one's thoughts. And the thought about one's emotions, we're not often even in touch with what goes on physically. We're already abstracting ideas from it. I am angry, I've got to express this anger, rather than just feel in a moment of quiet listening what this all feels like. The knots, the pressures, the wrinkles and furrows in the forehead. tightness in the throat maybe. To listen to this whole thing as one looks at a picture, at a sculpture. Observing it not as me, but as something that is going on in this universe right now. Not just in oneself, but in every angry or fearful human being throughout this world since time immemorial has felt the same way and thought and reacted along the same passageways. Whether here or in Europe or in the Middle East and Asia, South Africa. The same processes are going on as one can observe in oneself, in all human beings. So, with some light shed into this dark room here, there is light shed into all dark rooms of all humanity. By which I don't mean that if there's insight here, there's automatically insight in someone else. There may not be. But here there's understanding of what goes on when there's no insight, when one just reacts. Whatever comes up, reaction from the past. Automatic, mechanical. So driving, so compulsive. In coming to a retreat, maybe as a new person, meaning never having been here before, or having been to other centers, spiritual training places, or coming for the nth time here. So often there is a hope or expectation of being given something to work on, some kind of a practice that will allow the mind to calm down, maybe thoughts to diminish, or hopefully end. So very often, people either ask, what is the practice here, what can you recommend? Or there's frustration with not having a practice and therefore constantly overwhelmed by thoughts. And what good is that? What good does that do me? Come here and just sit with barrages of thoughts. Thoughts/feeling, because thoughts are connected, interconnected with feelings. There's no such separate thing as a thought and a feeling. Thought, feeling go together. sensation, so forth. A person feels it doesn't do him or her any good to have the sitting filled with thoughts. Why is one here? Is one here in order to begin to feel good about oneself? To receive or create an empty mind? To find peace in oneself, equanimity, tranquility, which one hopes is there someplace buried? Or can one be here just to find out what's going on? Not whether it's good for me or bad for me, but what is it? If one craves a practice or is attached to a practice that is able to control thoughts, how can one understand what thoughts control our reactions? Physically, mentally, in relationship. If one really wants to find out how we live alone and together, doesn't one have to look without any distraction? Distraction in this case being a practice which one adheres to mechanically in order to control the mind. We talked about it last Monday in Rochester at a talk. There were a few people there. One person came, several people came to see me later at the house where we have meetings. And one person said it was such a relief to realize that one doesn't have to get rid of anything, that it's just all right to look what's there. Is it all right just to look what's there? That's easier said than done. It takes really energy to attend without immediately falling for escapes. Because very often we don't want to see what's there. That's what, for many people, makes this work a painful one until it's understood. That what is revealed is a human mind, human reaction and relationship, and ignorance, and sorrow. Not just me, of which we have such definite images. This is why it is difficult to look at oneself, is because we are attached to ideas about what we should look like to others. These early trainings that all of us have received in moral values, don't lie, don't take cookies. I talked once to a mother who said, I'm going to teach my child very early that it's a sin to steal cookies out of the cookie jar. Can you imagine how you grow up as a child? Your mother feels it's a sin to steal a cookie. To steal a cookie. these ideas about ourselves reverberate. How we should be and how it feels when we're not this way, when Mother punishes us, tells us what we are, a liar or a thief. So the ideas of what we should be and what is bad to be are very deeply ingrained in the human mind, not just in mine or yours, it's in the human mind over generations. And because of all of this, there's such hesitancy, such fear at actually seeing the greed, the duplicity in us, saying one thing but doing another for fear of not being what one thinks one is, or trying to create an impression by saying what we are but not doing what we're saying. This total incongruency, incompatibility with our ideals about ourselves and our actual behavior. Does one see that if there is this attachment to the ideal of ourselves, what an ideal person of our upbringing and social class and religion and race and so forth, what that person should be like, if there's an attachment to that and a value, a deep ingrained value placed on this, how can we look how we actually talk and behave and interact and think? So we are operating on two different levels and the twain don't meet unless there is insight into it and awareness. And when there is awareness, there's so often this conflict. I don't want to look. It's too painful. People have told me this. It's too painful for me to come to retreat because of what I see. I don't want to be there. See what I see about myself. I don't want to be like that. So, what will open the door? And not immediately shut it again. The opening of the door, the seeing what actually is going on happens on its own when one is concerned with all of this and inquires and looks and wonders and sits still or walks quietly, stops in the middle of the momentum of a reaction. Then awareness and insight happen. And then we ask this question, but well, then what happens? Immediate shutting of the door? Or can one be with it? Allow what has revealed itself for a moment to show itself fully in an awareness that is free of judgment, free of self-referral, self-identification, this is me, to see that and not fall for it. To pay such careful attention what goes on when something is seen about oneself, so that automatic habits don't immediately close doors and windows and the dark room continues. So, we talked about it last night in looking at oneself, investigating, inquiring deeply. Does an enclosure take place in that? Again, the self-concern, or is the inquiring mind open to what else is going on? An open listening, looking, feeling, touching. Without immediately reacting and knowing what everything is. Seeing words come up. But the word wind or air or bird is not what's actually happening, is it? What is actually happening this instant, we don't know. Knowledge always comes a bit later. This instant is not known. Does one feel the urge to know it in order to feel secure about it, at ease? Can that movement come into awareness? Wanting to know, and the dis-ease or uneasiness about not knowing, which is made up of idea, I should know what will happen to me. To see how the web, it's like a spider. One walks through the forest and has run into a spider web. It's crushed. And if one comes back on the same path, there it is again. It's already, the strings are already across the trees again, and the thing is being woven. This happens with thought in the same way. Not to discourage over it, just to see it as a living fact. So in sitting, people often say, well, is it all right if I follow my breathing for a while? I'm used to it, it helps me. You don't have to ask me. It's up to each one what one wants to do or needs to do. Here, since it is being brought up, one can ask, well, what does it mean to follow the breathing? The breathing happens, doesn't it? Every moment there is a breathing, an inhalation, an exhalation. How does one follow it? Is there already an automaticness or a mechanicalness about it? One is compulsorily following the breath from where it starts or to where it goes, and sort of hanging on to it, grasping it, for fear one could lose track of the breathing. With that, one is in conflict with other things that are going on, other sounds, or fears inside for being lost in thought. Or can this breathing, which is there in its wondrousness, it's really an unfathomable thing that's going on. Does one listen to it as it happens, because it's there along with all the other ongoings in the room and outside of the room? Not compelling the mind to concentrate on it, but to listen to it as to the wind in the trees. Not calling it practice, not calling it inhalation, not calling it exhalation, not calling it following, but just as wide open. The amazement that comes with really feeling, experiencing that thing, which cannot be pinned down to any particular location. Breath pervades the whole organism. And where does it come from? Where do we get it from? It's there. It happens. In a way too wondrous to comprehend. So to have this quiet inward listening, which, if that takes place, cannot but be aware of what we call breathing. But not as a practice, but as a living, ongoing whatever. So often with thinking of one's breath as a good vehicle for practice, there goes control of the breathing, trying to make it deeper, less shallow, more yogic. All of these ideas about what breath is or should be like, and not, again, in touch with what it actually is if we don't know it. If we don't use it for purposes, to get something, to achieve something, or arrive at some state of mind. The state of mind is there now. What is it? If we don't use it to get someplace else. What is it now when we don't know? We will end here for today.